Two men stand in a field just east of a closed garden, watching fire consume what they have built. Two altars, two offerings. One column of smoke pulling straight up into the sky, accepted. One column of smoke beaten back down to the dirt, rejected. Same field, same fire. Two entirely different verdicts. Genesis chapter 4, verses 3 through 5 inches, the King James Version, builds the scene. And in process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of his flock, and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect unto Abel and to his offering. But unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. Picture it, the first recorded act of human worship outside of Eden, and it ends in catastrophic failure. The smoke of Cain's altar falls, his face falls, and eventually his brother falls. But the true mystery of Genesis 4 is not simply that God preferred a lamb over a harvest. The mystery is the precise, calculated, unnamed thing Cain was holding in his hands. Read that text again. Watch what the English translation does. Or rather, watch what it refuses to do. Abel brings the firstlings of his flock and the fat thereof. Specific, qualitative adjectives. He brings the earliest and the best. But look at Cain's hands. Cain brought of the fruit of the ground. No adjectives, no first fruits, no best, just fruit. Stop right there. Generations of readers have stared at that verse and assumed Cain just brought a careless, generic handful of wheat or berries, a lazy offering. But there is an older voice in the room. There is an ancient Aramaic translation and expansion of the Torah known as Targum Pseudo-Jonathan. It was read in the early synagogues. It preserved the oral traditions of the Jewish people alongside the written text, locking in details the translation left behind. I offer it as that, one tradition's record, not as canon. But the Targum does not believe Cain's offering was generic. It does not believe it was an accident. The Targum records the exact calendar day of this fire, and more importantly, it records the exact, specific crop that Cain pulled from the dirt. See the scene. Cain is a tiller of the ground. He knows the soil. He knows the curse that God spoke over that soil back in Genesis 3. He knows thorns and thistles. He is not a man grabbing the first green thing he sees. He is a man who engineered a very specific harvest to place on a very specific altar. Look at the altar itself. The stones stacked in the dirt, the heat rising off the rocks. Abel's sacrifice bleeds. It requires a knife. It requires a life taken. The fat burns, and the smell of the herd goes up. Cain's sacrifice requires no knife, only a sickle, only the sweat of his brow. He is bringing the exact thing God cursed just one chapter earlier. He is bringing the ground. The text says Cain brought of the fruit of the ground. The English phrase is flat. It sounds like apples or grain, but the silence of the King James text here is deafening. When Noah plants a vineyard, the text tells us exactly what he grew. When the Israelites gather manna, the text describes its color and taste. But here, at the most consequential altar in human history, the exact crop is redacted from the English. The Targum Pseudo-Jonathan unredacts it. It pulls back the veil on the exact seed Cain chose to burn. And it tells us that this was not a clumsy mistake made by a novice farmer, but an argument, two altars in a field, and a single word missing from the English text that changes the entire nature of the crime. Before we open the Targum to find the exact seed Cain planted, we have to look closely at the Hebrew words, defining the two men standing in the smoke. What happens when you put Abel's firstlings next to Cain's fruit in the original language? Look at the hands of the two brothers. Genesis 4:4. And Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of his flock, and of the fat thereof. The King James translation is precise. But the Hebrew underneath it is a scalpel. It cuts away any illusion that these two offerings were equal in effort. Watch what the text does. The Hebrew word for Abel's offering is Bechorah, the firstborn, the first to open the womb. This is not just a chronological marker. It is an assignment of supreme value. Alongside it, Abel brings the heleb, the fat. In the ancient world, long before the Levitical priesthood codified it, the fat was understood as the most sacred, vital portion of a living thing. Abel is not just handing over a sheep, he is bleeding out his absolute best. Stop right there. Now look at Cain. Genesis 4-3, he brings peri ha-adama, fruit of the ground, that is all the Hebrew says. Peri, yield, produce. There is no adjective, there is no qualifier. Read that again. Later in the Hebrew Bible, when God establishes the laws of the harvest, he commands the Israelites to bring the bikurim, the first fruits, the earliest, untouched, premier yield of the soil. If Cain had brought the very best of his fields, the text had the vocabulary to say so. Moses, writing this account, knew the word bikurim, but he refuses to use it here. He strips Cain's offering bare. He leaves him holding generic peri. The silence of the text is an accusation. If you harvest a field, you have the premier stalks, the bruised grain, and the leftovers that fall to the dirt. Cain brings the yield. Just the yield. But the true weight of this moment lands when you look at where that generic fruit came from. The ground. Ha-adama. This is not neutral soil. This is the exact same dirt that God sentenced just one chapter earlier. Go back to the judgment at the edge of the garden. Genesis 3:17. Cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Sit with that. Abel bypassed the cursed earth. He raised a flock. His offering grazes above the dirt, untouched by the thorns and thistles of the Edenic decree. His altar demands a knife. It demands a life poured out. But Cain digs his bare hands directly into the sentence of God. He tills the Adamah. He brings the exact thing that God has cursed, and he places it on the rocks, as if his own sweat could wash the curse away. He is not asking for atonement. He is presenting his labor. It is easy to read this Hebrew word study and conclude that Cain was simply a careless farmer, a man who grabbed whatever stalks were closest to the edge of his field when the time came to build an altar, a lazy worshipper. But the ancient world did not read it that way. The sages did not see a lazy man. They saw a lethal one. They believed the generic peri of the Hebrew text was a covering for a highly specific, deliberately engineered crop. A seed planted not in ignorance, but in open rebellion. But before we can open the Aramaic Targums to uncover the exact name of that seed, we have to look closer at the curse it grew in. One brother brought the bleeding first, while the other brought the bare yield of a sentenced earth. But the dirt holds a deeper memory than just thorns and thistles. What exactly happened to the soil in Genesis 3 that made an offering pulled from the ground an act of spiritual treason? Step away from the two altars of Genesis 4 for a moment. Walk westward, back to the closed gates of Eden. Genesis 3:24, a flaming sword turning every way. Outside that gate stands a man, exiled, staring down at the dirt. Genesis 3:17, King James Version. And unto Adam he said, Because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, Thou shalt not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Read that again. God did not curse Adam directly. He cursed the Adamah, the soil. He weaponized the earth against the man. Verse 18 makes it physical. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee. The ground is now hostile territory. it will fight back. It will require the sweat of the brow just to force it to yield bread. See the scene. We look at Cain's harvest and see simple agriculture. The ancient Hebrew mind looked at Cain's harvest and saw the physical manifestation of the fall. Abel understood the shift. He became a keeper of sheep. He stepped back from the dirt. He took dominion over the animals, a remnant of the original Edenic mandate that was not explicitly cursed in the soil's sentence. When Abel builds his altar, he brings blood. He brings a life poured out. He acknowledges that death has entered the world, and a cost must be paid. But Cain digs his bare hands directly into the sentence of God. I offer this as one reading of the ancient mind, not the final word, but it changes how you look at the smoke falling to the ground. Cain takes the very instrument of human punishment, the cursed, hostile earth, and offers its yield back to the Lord as a gift. It is like presenting a judge with the gavel he just used to sentence you. Cain is making a theological statement. He is declaring, I will take the curse. I will work it with my own strength, and the sweat of my brow will be sufficient to stand before you. It is not a sacrifice. It is defiance masked as a tithe. But the earth is not just a passive stage in this story. Watch what the text does. The ground is practically a character in Genesis. It is the thing Cain tills. It is the thing God cursed. And just a few verses later, it is the thing that will open its literal mouth to swallow Abel's blood. The Adama is awake, and it is hungry. Cain understood exactly what he was working with. If you are going to challenge the Creator using the very dirt, he cursed. You do not just grab a random handful of wheat. You do not bring an afterthought. You bring a masterpiece of human labor. You bring a crop that proves you have conquered the soil on your own terms. The King James translation leaves Cain's harvest locked behind the generic word fruit. But the older Jewish traditions did not forget what he grew. They preserved the name of a very specific crop. A crop that exhausts the soil, requires brutal, multi-step labor to process, and is never meant to be eaten. The cursed earth yielded something exact. The ancient Aramaic translation knows the seed. What was Cain actually holding when he approached the fire? Open the ancient Aramaic scroll. Targum Pseudo-Jonathan on Genesis 4-3. The scribes who translated and expanded the Torah in this text were not guessing at the missing details of the English Bible. They were writing down the oral memory of the Jewish people. They were preserving the name of the exact crop that fell to the dirt when Cain's fire died. The Targum reads, "And it was at the end of days, on the 14th of Nisan, that Cain brought of the produce of the earth, the seed of flax, an offering of first things unto the Lord." Read that again. The seed of flax. Suddenly, the generic fruit of the ground has a face, and it changes the entire geometry of the first murder. If you are a farmer in the ancient Near East, flax is not your food. It is not your daily bread. Flax is a textile. It is the raw material used to weave linen. Picture the process of the harvest. You do not just pick flax and toss it on an altar. It is not an apple. Flax must be uprooted from the earth. It must be submerged in water and left to rot, a brutal process called retting. It must be beaten, scraped, combed, and spun. It exhausts the soil it grows in, and it breaks the back of the man who works it. This is the ultimate manifestation of the sweat of the brow. This shatters the centuries-old assumption of a lazy farmer. Cain did not grab a careless handful of leftover grain. He brought the most labor-intensive, soil-depleting crop in the ancient world. He brought a masterpiece of human engineering. He manufactured a garment from the cursed earth, and he held it up to the fire. Stop right there. Why a garment? Go back to the garden. Genesis 3-7. When Adam and Eve rebelled, their eyes were opened to their own nakedness. What was their immediate, instinctual response? They took the yield of the earth fig leaves and sewed them together. They tried to cover their own sin with a plant-based garment of their own making. God rejected it. Genesis 3:21. Unto Adam also and to his wife did the Lord God make coats of skins and clothed them. Sit with that. God killed an animal. Blood was shed. The innocent died to cover the guilty. He stripped away the leaves of the earth and replaced them with the skins of the flock. Now look at the two altars in the field. Abel brings the animal. He brings the blood. He aligns himself with the provision of God in Eden. But Cain brings the plant. He brings the raw material for linen. He brings the exact thing his father tried to use to cover his own shame, a covering pulled directly from the dirt. He is standing at the altar, offering the raw material of human self-righteousness. I offer this as their telling, not as proven fact, but tested against the weight of the biblical text. The ancient Jewish mind did not view Cain's flax as a simple agricultural choice. It was a theological weapon. It was an attempt to reverse the decree of Eden. Cain was declaring that the earth was enough, that his labor was enough, that he did not need the blood of the flock to stand before the Creator. Two materials met at the altar that day: the wool of Abel's sheep and the linen of Cain's flax. And the reaction between those two materials ended in the first shedding of human blood. We look at the murder of Abel as a tragedy of jealousy, but the God of Israel looked at it as a permanent fracture in the fabric of creation. Two distinct threads collided in the field of Genesis 4, and one brother died. If this ancient tradition is true, if Cain truly brought flax and Abel truly brought the flock, how did God memorialize the crime? What bizarre, unexplained commandment is waiting hundreds of years later in the book of Leviticus, forbidding Israel from ever letting those two exact materials touch again? Fast forward centuries, the wilderness of Sinai. A priest of Israel stands holding a woven garment, pulling the fabric apart, inspecting the threads under the desert sun. He is looking for a crime. Not a crime of theft or violence, but a crime of botany and biology. A crime of mixture. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 19. King James Version. God dictates a bizarre, highly specific physical boundary to Moses. Ye shall keep my statutes. Neither shall a garment mingled of linen and woolen come upon thee. Deuteronomy 22:11 sharpens the edge. Thou shalt not wear a garment of divers sorts, as of woolen and linen together. Stop right there. Of all the commands in the Torah, this one has baffled readers for millennia. Why these two materials? God does not forbid the mixing of silk and cotton, or leather and goat hair. He specifically outlaws the combination of wool and linen. The Hebrew word for this forbidden mixture is shatnez. It is a strange, jagged word, almost alien to Hebrew roots, used only to describe this exact collision of fabrics. Read the law again through the lens of Genesis 4. If you accept the ancient memory of the Targum that Cain pulled flax from the cursed earth, and Abel pulled wool from the bleeding flock, this Levitical law ceases to be a random textile regulation. It becomes a memorial. It becomes a physical monument to the first murder. Picture the priest inspecting the threads. He is holding the two halves of the first human war. Wool is Abel, the shepherd, the animal, the covering of skins, the innocent life laid down. Linen is Cain, the tiller of the ground, the plant, the sweat of the brow, the attempt to weave an Edenic covering from the cursed earth. When God forbids shatnez, he is writing the tragedy of Genesis 4 into the daily wardrobe of every Israelite. He is embedding a permanent, tactile boundary into the nation. He is declaring, never let the offering of Cain touch the offering of Abel again. The collision of human effort and divine requirement ends in death. two materials, two altars, two destinies. Watch what the text does with this separation. There was only one man in all of ancient Israel permitted to wear shatnez, the high priest. The ephod he wore into the Holy of Holies was woven of gold, blue, purple, and scarlet thread linen mixed intricately with dyed wool. Why him? Because only the high priest, carrying the blood of atonement into the presence of the Creator, had the authority to reconcile the fractured elements of Eden. For everyone else, the mixture was lethal. The ordinary Israelite could not wear it, because the ordinary human heart cannot carry the tension of Abel and Cain without blood spilling into the dirt. This is the weight of the biblical text. It does not forget its own history. The dirt of Genesis 4 is still under the fingernails of the book of Leviticus. The smoke of the twin altars is still hanging in the air over Sinai. But the murder of Abel did not happen the moment the smoke fell. There is a gap, a terrifying, silent pause between the rejection of the flax and the lifting of the stone. Go back to the field in Genesis 4. The fire is out. Cain's face has fallen. And in that silence, God speaks a warning to the older brother. But look closely at the King James translation of Genesis 4-7. God does not just warn Cain about an abstract emotion. If you look at the Hebrew beneath the English, God warns him about a literal, breathing entity waiting in the dirt. God stands at the entrance of the field, the air heavy with the scent of smoldering flax and blood. The brothers are before him. One face is radiant with acceptance, the other is a mask of jagged, broken pride. God speaks to the one whose hands are empty of sacrifice, even though he believes they are full. Genesis 4-6-7, King James Version. And the Lord said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth? And why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shalt thou not be accepted? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door. And unto thee shall be his desire, and thou unto him shalt rule over him. Read that again. Sin lieth at the door. That is how the English presents it. A passive, moral abstraction. A temptation waiting like a shadow. But take that word lieth and pull it back to the Hebrew. It is robets. Stop right there. Robets is not a passive verb. It is the specific anatomical posture of a predator. It is the crouching of a lion, muscles coiled, waiting for the exact moment the prey breaks cover. It is the stance of a beast that has been tracking the scent of blood for hours. God is not warning Cain about a moral failing inside his own mind. He is telling him that something is physically present at the threshold of his own home. Something that is not merely temptation, but an entity. If this is a predator, what is the door? Look at the geography of the fall. When Adam and Eve were cast out, the door was the gate of Eden, guarded by the flaming sword. But Cain is not at Eden. He is in the field. He is in the soil. He has built his own altar. He has created his own entrance to the presence of God. The ancient Jewish traditions, such as the Midrashic literature of Genesis Rabbah, frequently personified this robets. They saw it as the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination that had now taken on a semi-physical reality because of the rejection of Cain's offering. Cain's refusal to bring the blood of the flock had created a vacuum. Something crawled in to fill it. Picture it. Cain is standing in the doorway of his own life, and God is telling him to look down, to look at what is crouching there. If the sin is a predator, Cain is the prey. But Cain is not acting like a man who is being hunted. He is acting like a man who is negotiating. The book of Jasher, an ancient historical chronicle referenced in Joshua and 2 Samuel, fills in the silence that follows God's warning. It describes a conversation between the brothers in the field that the Bible summarizes, but does not transcribe. The brothers are arguing about the nature of God's justice. Cain is arguing that there is no judge, no world to come, and that the sacrifice of the animal was a delusion. He is pushing a theology of the dirt. He is convinced that because he worked the soil belongs to him, and God owes him the favor of the harvest. He is not just a killer. He is a theologian of self-sufficiency, and the predator at the door is listening to every word of his argument. Why did the ancient traditions insist that the conflict was not just a burst of heat, but a calculated, philosophical murder? The fire is cold. The altar of flax is dead. Two brothers walk away from the place of worship and step out into the open expanse. Genesis chapter 4, verse 8, King James Version. And Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass, when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and slew him. Stop right there. Read that first phrase again. And Cain talked with Abel. The English makes it sound like a passing conversation, a quiet moment before a sudden burst of rage. But beneath the translation, the Hebrew text contains a startling grammatical anomaly. The verse reads, Wayomer Cain el Hebel Akiv, literally translated, and Cain said to Abel his brother, and then nothing. In the oldest Hebrew scrolls, there is a literal blank space right in the middle of the verse. Scribes call it a pisca, emza pasuk, a pause in the middle of the line. The text tells us, Cain spoke, but the exact words are surgically removed from the canonical record. What did Cain say in that field? To find the missing words, we turn to the book of Jasher, an ancient historical chronicle, referenced directly in the canonical Bible in Joshua chapter 10 and 2 Samuel chapter 1. Jasher does not leave the space blank. It records the violent theological dispute that erupted in the dirt. See the scene. Cain looks at the shepherd. He looks back at the sky that rejected his harvest, and he makes a declaration of absolute rebellion. According to the ancient Jewish memory preserved in Jasher and the Aramaic Targums, Cain argues that there is no judge, there is no judgment, there is no world to come, and there is no reward for the righteous. He is dismantling the authority of God over the Adamah. Cain is declaring that the physical earth is all that exists. If he worked the soil belongs to him. If his labor produced the flax, God had no right to reject it. He is furious that Abel's bleeding animal was accepted over his own manufactured garment. He is pushing a theology of the dirt. Abel does not stay silent. The ancient texts record that Abel defends the Creator. He argues that there is a judge, there is a world to come, and the fire fell on his altar simply because his sacrifice aligned with the requirement of God. He reminds Cain that blood is required to cover sin. Two worldviews colliding, one brother clinging to the blood of the flock, the other demanding that his own sweat be enough. The argument peaks. Genesis 4-8 finishes the sentence, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and slew him. He did not kill him over territory. He did not kill him over a feud. He killed him over theology. The first murder was a religious execution. And look at where it happens. The text emphasizes that they were in the field. The Hebrew word is sadeh, the open, uncultivated, wild earth. Cain, the tiller of the ground, brings his brother out into his own domain. When he strikes the lethal blow, ancient midrashic traditions suggest he did not use his bare hands. He used a stone or an iron implement of the harvest. He used the earth itself to crush the life out of the shepherd. I offer this as their telling, not as proven fact. But look at how perfectly it aligns with the geometry of the curse. Cain tried to offer the cursed earth to God, and God refused it. Now, in a horrifying inversion of the sacrifice, Cain offers his brother to the cursed earth. But the dirt of Genesis 4 is not passive. The moment the blood leaves Abel's veins and hits the soil, the equation of the field violently shifts. The earth that was cursed to yield thorns is about to do something terrifying. What happens when the ground physically opens its mouth? Genesis chapter 4, verse 10, King James Version. And he said, "What hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground." Verse 11 finishes the terrifying sequence. "And now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand." Stop right there. Look at what the text just did. God does not merely exile Cain, he curses him from the Adamah. The earth itself, the very thing Cain spent his life cultivating, the very thing he believed he had mastered enough to present on an altar of stone. See the scene. The cursed soil of Eden has just tasted human blood for the first time. The ground literally opened its mouth. Cain tried to force the earth to produce a covering for his sin, and instead, the earth consumed the only innocent man standing in the field. The predator at the door did not just wait, it struck. I hold this as one reading, not the final word. But if you layer the Aramaic Targums and the Chronicles of Jasher over the Hebrew of Genesis 4, the story of Cain and Abel is no longer a children's fable about a jealous farmer. It is a blueprint of human rebellion. It is the exact moment a man decided that the sweat of his brow could replace the blood of the lamb. Go back now to the field where this film began. 2 altars built in the dirt just east of a closed garden. One column of smoke pulling straight up into the sky. One column of smoke beaten back down to the ground. You have looked at that scene your entire life and seen 2 brothers making an offering. But tonight, you know exactly what is burning on the rocks. You see the bloody wool of the shepherd, and you see the woven linen of the exiled farmer. You see the genesis of a war that will echo all the way to the priesthood of Israel, where a physical line is drawn in the fabric of the nation, forbidding those 2 threads from ever touching again. Cain did not bring an accident to the altar. He brought an argument. He brought a calculated, engineered defiance, harvested directly from the judgment of God. The mystery of what happened to Cain after this, the mark placed on his forehead, his exile to the land of Nod, a name that literally translates to wandering, is a shadow. The text deliberately leaves unresolved. The Bible tells us, he went out from the presence of the Lord and built the first city, but the soil never yielded its strength to him again. The dirt is still holding the rest of that secret. If you made it to the end of this field, comment the word "watched" below. Subscribe to the channel, because there are more ancient threads buried in the Hebrew that we are about to pull. And send this to one person who loves the mysteries of the early chapters of Genesis, but has never heard the secret of the flax and the wool. The smoke over the first altar cleared thousands of years ago, but the argument that started the fire is still burning today.